So doing the official political action is a lot of fun, and you do get results. The unofficial part is also a lot of fun, and this is when I got involved with Queer Nation. We did actions. It was a sort of thing where there was an ongoing presence of Queer Nation. We're talking about the 80s, early 90s, here in Seattle. And one of the actions was a cop arrested somebody, two guys, on 11th and Pike, of all places, kissing in public. And the cops didn't like that. And so they interfered, and then a lesbian stood up and got in their face, and so they arrested her and took her to the East Precinct. She broke their cribbage board, and so that was a perfect action for Queer Nation. The next week, we all showed up at East Precinct, and we did a kiss-in, sitting on the police desks, filling the lobby, and it was not only made a good statement for the LGBT community. I got 3 dates out of it. Same thing happened at the World Trade Organization, WTO protests. Met a very nice cop, and we were friends for quite a long time. I mentioned to you the Queer Nation action that we did down in Oregon. There was a movement in Oregon led by a person named Lon Mabon, whom you've probably heard from other people, to ban gays and lesbians from schools, and the whole homophobia thing was going on down there. And one of these was Measure 2. Well, I volunteered and drove down there and worked several weekends at their headquarters down there, just as an individual. And yes, when we were locking up the office late at night, there were, the hoods parked out in their cars out in front to try to intimidate us. But we did beat that measure. One of the actions we did take, and I'm not really clear on this, whether this action was connected with Measure 2 or the next measure, but Queer Nation met right here in this neighborhood, and we went down and did a funeral procession from Perfect Universe shopping center. We draped our cars in black. We were all in leathers, and we drove slowly to Lon Mabon's headquarters. And we got out, and we did a perfect formation in front. We had 4 television crews working it, and we laid a black wreath at the door. That was a great action. We had a lot of fun doing that. Let's see. Seattle Metropolitan Elections Committee. This committee, I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yeah. Anyway, that was also a lot of work, but we really got to work the candidates and then publish the results. It almost became a ritual. There was a certain activity we did in January. It was kind of a fundraiser and meet the candidates who were already coming out. And then we do the interviews during the summer and then publish the results. And later I became co-chair with Herb Crone. And we devised the grading system and the interview system to build the credibility, so that our questions and our results were graded fairly for every candidate. It was a result of the Sherry Harris campaign in 1991 that, and this is where I met Bill DeBay, He was the Yardside King. And when she got elected, she nominated me for the Commission for Lesbians and Gays. And I worked on that from 92 to, I think, 97. Jerry DeGreek was one of the co-chairs I worked with. And, but we had several co-chairs during that whole event. The two efforts that I worked on there was one, domestic partnership. And we passed the domestic partnership ordinance in the city. I remember Norm Rice we met in his office, the bunch of us, and he said, well, find out what the other cities are doing. You know, what's the status of this? Maybe we can get back together in a couple months. And I said, I'll have it on your desk in 2 weeks. And he said, oh yeah? Well, I was working for Microsoft at that time. And at Microsoft, we didn't take any prisoners. We didn't waste any time. If it was going to be a 48-hour effort, it's going to be a 48-hour effort. And this is when I'm still trying to remember his name, executive director at Lambert House, we got together on the phones and we called, is that the one? Was that the one we did? No, that was a different effort. That was a different effort. I'll get back to that. We did. We got the results from all the other cities who already had domestic partner benefits, registration, and yep, it was passed here in Seattle. And Cal Anderson and his partner, I think, stood in line. They were the first ones to register. Cal was a good friend. We miss him. I remember testifying in Olympia a couple of times with him, when the anti-gay measures came up here to Washington State, of course, Hands Off Washington was working on that. There's another name that I should have written down a list of names for you because there's so many of them right now. But Hands Off Washington was working those, and as these measures came up here, and Lon Mabin came up here too, and they were trying to push the anti-gay measures in Seattle. Let me organize this a little bit. On the Queer Nation side, this was beginning of '93. I think it was February 6th of '93. Come to think of it. Yeah, when KCTS was putting on a Lon Mabin show with several of the conservatives from Jack Kemp. He was one of the anti-gay people who was meeting there, and they were putting on a show. So Queer Nation decided to put a protest. In 1 week, we organized 600 people to surround KCTS. And I liaisoned with the police. So we had, okay, we're going to stand here. You guys are just going to stand there. Police going to ride around on their horses. Everybody's going to be cool. And it was wonderful, wonderful protest. And brilliant sunshine. It was really good.